1986, Pepperell, Massachusetts. Population 10,000. Two girls hear tapping. Their father says it's grief. Weeks later, someone writes on the basement wall in red, "Come find me." By the end of this story, you'll know who wrote those words, where he was hiding, and why the worst part of this case hadn't even happened yet. In the fall of 1986, in a small town called Pepperell on the New Hampshire border in Massachusetts, two teenage sisters are trying to hold their lives together. Tina Bowen is 15. Her younger sister Karen is 9. Their mother has recently died of cancer. The death came suddenly, it caught the family off guard, and now the two girls live with their father, Frank Bowen, in a modest house on Lawrence Street. Frank works long hours. He has to. With his wife gone, the income has to come from somewhere. That means Tina and Karen are left alone in the house most evenings, alone with their grief and each other. The girls miss their mother terribly. Tina was close with her. Karen was close with her. The house feels different now, emptier, colder, like something has been taken out of it that can never be put back. And so, one evening, when Frank is out at work, the girls do something that a lot of grieving people have done. They get out a Ouija board. They go down to the basement, and they try to contact their mother. They do not really expect anything to happen. They have not researched how a seance works. They simply sit there, the two of them, and ask questions into the silence. "Mom, are you here? Can you give us a sign? Are you looking after us?" The planchette does not move. No candles flicker. Nothing happens. After a couple of hours, they put the board away and go upstairs. In a way, it was a comfort just to sit and think about their mother, to feel close to her, even if only for a moment. They go to bed. Frank has not come home yet. The house is quiet. The house on Lawrence Street is old, the kind of New England home where the pipes groan in the winter and the floorboards creak when the temperature drops. It has a basement with a washer and dryer, bedrooms upstairs, and walls thick enough that sound travels strangely between rooms. Before their mother died, none of this mattered. The house felt full. Now it feels hollow, like it is holding its breath. And with Frank gone most nights, the two sisters have developed a routine of staying close to each other, watching television in the front room until they are too tired to keep their eyes open, and then retreating to their separate bedrooms, where each of them lies in the dark, trying not to think about how quiet the house has become. And then, lying in their separate bedrooms in the dark, both girls hear something at the same time, a tapping sound, coming from inside the walls. Karen gets up and goes to Tina's room. "Do you hear that?" Tina hears it too, a rhythmic, deliberate tapping. Not a pipe settling, not a branch scraping a window. Something tapping from inside the wall, as if someone were knocking from the other side. The girls are scared, but they are also 15 and 9, and their mother just died. They want this to be her. They need it to be her. And so they begin speaking to the sound. "Mom? Is that you? Are you here with us?" The tapping continues. It does not answer in words, but it responds. Tap, 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 as if something is listening. When Frank comes home later that night, the girls rush to tell him. They are not frightened, they are excited. They think their mother is trying to reach them from the other side. They tell him about the Ouija board, the seance, and the tapping. Frank listens. He is exhausted. He is grieving. And he thinks his daughters are making it up, not maliciously, but because they are desperate for some connection to the woman they lost. He considers putting them in therapy, not because he is angry, but because he recognizes grief when he sees it manifesting in unhealthy ways. "Go back to bed," he tells them. "I'm sure she's watching over us. We'll talk about it tomorrow." But the tapping does not stop. Over the following days, it returns every night. It is loudest when the girls are alone. When Frank is home and they call him to listen, the tapping stops, every time, as if whatever is making the sound knows when to go silent. The girls begin to feel like they are losing their minds. The tapping is real. They both hear it, but their father never does. Then other things start happening. When the family leaves the house and comes back, small things have changed. A piece of furniture shifted slightly out of position. Silverware rearranged in the drawer. A chair moved from one side of the room to the other. Food disappearing from the refrigerator. A milk carton that was full in the morning is nearly empty by evening. Little things. The kind of things that make you question whether you are remembering correctly. Frank's patience wears thin. He tells the girls he knows they are doing this. He knows they want the ghost to be real. He knows they miss their mother. But moving furniture and playing games is not healthy, and if they do not stop, he is going to insist they see a grief counselor. The girls swear they are not responsible. They beg him to believe them, but he does not. And this puts them in a terrible position, because they know the tapping is real, they know the furniture is moving, and now they also know that whatever is in their house is not their mother. A mother's spirit would not steal food. A mother's spirit would not rearrange silverware to scare her own children. This feels like something else entirely, something that is playing with them. Think about what these two girls are experiencing. They are grieving the loss of their mother. Their father is gone most nights. They are hearing sounds they cannot explain. Objects are being moved when no one is home. And the one adult they can turn to does not believe them. They are completely alone with whatever this is. The tapping was bad enough, but over the weeks it started to feel more deliberate. Sometimes it came in short bursts, 3 quick taps, then silence. Other times it would go on for minutes, slow and rhythmic, like someone dragging a fingernail along the inside of the wall. There were nights when the girls could swear they heard breathing. Not from outside, not from the basement. From inside the wall itself, just inches from where they were lying. They stopped sleeping well. Tina told friends at school that she was afraid to be in her own house. Karen, only 9 years old, started sleeping on the floor of Tina's room because she did not want to be alone. Frank noticed the dark circles under their eyes. He noticed how they flinched at every sound. But he still believed it was grief, that their minds were manufacturing threats because they had lost the one person who made them feel safe. And then, one evening in January of 1987, the tapping changes. The girls are together in the front room. Frank is not home. The tapping starts again, but this time it is not coming from the walls. It is coming from the basement. Something about this moment gives them courage. Maybe it is frustration. Maybe it is the need to prove to themselves that they are not crazy. They decide to go downstairs and confront whatever is making the noise. They walk down the basement stairs together. The tapping stops. The basement is empty. Nothing. They are about to turn around and go back upstairs when they see it. On the basement wall, written in red, are the words, "Come find me. I'm in your closet." The girls run. They do not stop to think. They do not go back upstairs. They run out the front door and straight to the neighbor's house. They are hysterical. They tell the neighbor that something is happening in their house, that there is writing on the walls, and they cannot go back. The neighbor tells them to stay and wait for their father. Frank comes home. The neighbor pulls him aside and explains. Frank's first reaction is anger. This has gone too far. The girls are defacing the house now. This fantasy about their mother's ghost has crossed a line. He goes into the basement. He sees the writing, red letters on the wall. He is convinced the girls did it. He orders them to start seeing a grief counselor immediately. For several weeks after that, the house goes quiet. No tapping, no moved furniture, no writing. Whatever it was, it seems to have stopped. Before we get to what happened next, if this story has you on edge already, subscribe. Because what was happening in that house was far worse than anything the Bowen family imagined. Then one night, Frank is working late again. The girls are alone. They are sitting together in the front room, grateful for the weeks of silence, when the tapping starts again. This time it is coming from Tina's bedroom. They creep down the hall together and open the door. On the wall of Tina's bedroom, written in red, are the words, "I'm back. Find me if you can." The girls flee the house again. Same neighbor, same phone call to Frank, same argument. Frank is furious. He tells the girls and the neighbor to stay put. He is going to go into that house alone, search every room, every closet, every corner, and prove once and for all that there is nothing to be afraid of. Frank Bowen walks back to his own front door, opens it, and stops. The house has been ransacked. Furniture is overturned. Chairs are flipped upside down. Things have been pulled off shelves and thrown across rooms. This is not something his teenage daughters did in the 5 minutes since they left. Someone else is in this house. Frank moves through the destruction carefully. The house is silent. He makes his way upstairs to Tina's bedroom. He sees the writing on the wall, and then he looks toward the closet. Standing inside the closet is a figure, a person, wearing women's clothing, wearing a wig, holding a hatchet. The clothes are his dead wife's clothes. The wig sits crooked on the figure's head. The hatchet is real. For a long second, the two of them stare at each other. Then the figure bolts. He charges past Frank, out of the bedroom, through the house. Frank tries to grab him, tries to wrestle him, but the person is fast and Frank is caught completely off guard. A man in his dead wife's dress, holding a weapon, running through his children's home. Frank chases him, but the figure disappears somewhere in the house. Frank does not find him. He does not wait to find him. He runs outside, crosses the yard to the neighbor's house, and tells them to call 911. He makes sure his daughters are safe. The police arrive within minutes. They search the entire house, every room, every closet, under every bed, behind every door. They find nothing. Whoever was in that house is gone. The officers tell Frank what no parent wants to hear. They believe his story, but there is nothing more they can do. The intruder has vanished. They recommend that Frank and the girls stay with relatives until whoever this person is can be found. They will patrol the neighborhood and monitor the house. Frank is devastated. His daughters have been alone in that house for months with a person hiding inside it. A person with a hatchet. A person wearing his dead wife's clothes. The guilt is crushing. He did not believe them. He told them they were imagining things. He sent them to grief counseling for being afraid of a real threat. For 2 weeks, the Bowen family stays with relatives. Police watch the house. No one is found. No leads. No identification of the intruder. After 2 weeks of silence, the family decides it is time to go home. The police are watching the house. The doors are locked. A security system has been discussed. Whoever it was must have fled the area. Frank drives up his street. He looks at his house. There is a light on in the second-floor window. That is not supposed to be on. The police were only watching from the outside. No one has been inside since the family left. As Frank stares up at the window, a figure in a dress walks past it, clear as day. Frank does not go inside. He picks up the phone and calls the police. Within minutes, the house is surrounded. This time, the officers go in prepared. They open the front door and step into something out of a horror film. Every piece of furniture is flipped upside down, and on the ceiling, glued to the ceiling, are dozens of pennies. Red writing covers the walls in every room. Strange, cryptic messages scrawled in what appears to be ketchup. The house looks like a set from a psychological thriller. The officers search every room. Nothing. No one. Then one of them goes down to the basement. Behind the washer and dryer, he notices something. A small piece of wood covering what looks like an opening in the wall. He moves the appliances aside. He pulls the board away. Behind it is the entrance to a crawl space. The officer shines his flashlight inside. What he sees makes no sense at first. Someone has burrowed through the insulation between the walls of the house, not just in the basement, but throughout the entire structure. Narrow tunnels, some only a few inches wide, snake between the studs and up through the walls. And at intervals, in every room of the house, there are small holes cut through the drywall. Peepholes. Each one positioned so that whoever was inside the walls could look directly into the room on the other side. Someone had been living in the walls of this house, moving through the insulation like a rat through a maze, watching every room, listening to every conversation, seeing everything. And at the end of one of these tunnels, curled up in the dark between the studs, the police find him. His name is Daniel LaPlante. He is 16 years old. He lives in the neighboring town of Townsend. Danny LaPlante had briefly dated Tina Bowen, or tried to. He had called the Bowen house using a phone number he found during one of his many burglaries in the area. He told Tina and her sister over the phone that he was blonde, athletic, and good-looking. When Tina agreed to meet him, she was shocked. LaPlante was none of those things. Unkempt, greasy, and unsettling. The date lasted about an hour before Tina made an excuse to leave. During their brief meeting, LaPlante had asked disturbing questions about her mother, who had recently died. After Tina cut off contact, LaPlante did not move on. He broke into the Bowen home through the basement and found the crawlspace behind the washer and dryer. He realized that from there, he could burrow through the insulation and access the walls throughout the entire house. He carved peepholes into every room, and he began to live there. For months, Daniel LaPlante had been inside the walls of the Bowen family home. He listened to the girls grieve. He watched them hold the seance. He heard every conversation they had about their mother. And he used all of it. The tapping on the walls was him, knocking from inside the crawlspace. The moved furniture was him, sneaking out when the family left and rearranging things before slipping back into the walls. The red writing on the basement wall and on Tina's bedroom wall was him, using ketchup from the family's own refrigerator. The food that kept disappearing was him, eating their groceries in the dark between the studs. He had been watching them through those peepholes for months, watching them sleep, watching them cry, watching their father not believe them. And the night Frank found him in the closet, wearing his dead wife's clothes and a wig, holding a hatchet. LaPlante had not escaped the house. He had simply retreated back into the walls. The police searched every room that first night and found nothing, because LaPlante was not in a room. He was between the rooms, inside the structure itself. And when the family left for 2 weeks, he stayed. He had the house to himself. He flipped the furniture. He glued pennies to the ceiling. He wrote on every wall. He was not hiding. He was playing. He would move objects around, leave things out of place, rearrange drawers, just to prove that he had been there and no one had noticed. The break-ins were not about property. They were about control, about watching, about the thrill of existing in someone else's space without their permission. Daniel LaPlante was arrested and sent to a juvenile detention center. He was 16 years old. What he had done was terrifying. Months of psychological torture against a grieving family. But under Massachusetts law at the time, he was a juvenile. The charges were serious, but not capital. His mother remortgaged her house to pay his $10,000 bail. In October of 1987, less than a year after he was pulled from the walls of the Bowen home, Daniel LaPlante was released. Think about that. A teenager who lived inside the walls of a family's home for months, who terrorized 2 grieving girls, who stood in a closet wearing a dead woman's clothes and holding a hatchet, was back on the street in less than a year. What happened next is the reason this story exists, and it is the reason Daniel LaPlante will never leave prison. While out on bail and living with his mother and stepfather, LaPlante went right back to what he knew, breaking into homes in the neighborhood. On October 14, 1987, he burglarized a house on Elm Street in Townsend and stole 2.22 caliber Ruger firearms. His stepfather later found one of the guns in LaPlante's laundry basket. When confronted, LaPlante lied and said he had bought it a year earlier. On November 16th, LaPlante broke into the home of Andrew and Priscilla Gustafson, a young couple who had moved to Townsend 5 years earlier. Priscilla was a nursery school teacher. She was 33 years old and pregnant with her 3rd child. Her other 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William, attended school and a babysitter during the day. Andrew worked outside the home. LaPlante stole a cordless phone, cable boxes, and coins from a silver dollar collection. He was in and out. A standard daytime burglary. The family may not have even noticed right away. But LaPlante did not forget the Gustafson house. He had been inside. He knew the layout. He knew when people came and went. On December 1st, 1987, Daniel LaPlante walked through the woods that separated his home from the Gustafson residence. He was carrying one of the stolen .22 caliber firearms. He had obtained ammunition by lying to his brother's friend, and he had practiced loading and unloading the weapon in the days prior. He broke into the Gustafson home during the day while the family was out. Priscilla picked up William from a babysitter around 1 p.m. and returned home. She walked in and found LaPlante inside. What happened next was methodical and devastating. According to prosecutors, LaPlante tied Priscilla to her bed. He sexually assaulted her. Then, he shot her twice in the head at point-blank range with the .22 caliber firearm. She was found face down on her bed, her pillows soaked in blood. William, 5 years old, was in the house. LaPlante drowned him in one of the bathrooms. When 7-year-old Abigail came home from school later that afternoon, LaPlante was still there. He drowned her in a separate bathroom. 3 people, a pregnant mother and her 2 children, ages 33, 7, and 5. Andrew Gustafson discovered the bodies of his wife and children when he came home from work at approximately 5 p.m. The town of Townsend had never seen anything like this. A pregnant mother and her 2 young children, murdered inside their own home in the middle of the day. Neighbors who had waved to Priscilla that morning could not process what had happened. Parents pulled their children out of school. Doors that had never been locked were bolted shut. The Gustafson home sat on a quiet street lined with trees, the kind of neighborhood where children rode bicycles and families knew each other by name. Now it was a crime scene surrounded by yellow tape, and the community was gripped by a terror that would not lift until someone was caught. Andrew Gustafson, who had left for work that morning with his family alive and intact, came home to find everything destroyed. He would later have to explain to relatives, to friends, to a community, that his wife and both of his children were gone, and that the person who killed them had been inside their house before, had walked through their rooms, had touched their things, and had come back to finish what he started. Police questioned LaPlante 2 days later at the Townsend Public Library. He said he had been home alone watching television on the day of the murders. He described what he was wearing: gray sweatpants, a football shirt, Converse sneakers. The next day, when state police returned to question him further, LaPlante saw them approaching his house and jumped off the porch and ran. A massive manhunt was launched. Police dogs, helicopters, officers from multiple departments. LaPlante fled through the woods and broke into homes in neighboring Pepperell, the same town where the Bowen family lived. He stole a .32 caliber revolver from one house and took a woman named Pamela Makala hostage at gunpoint, forcing her to drive him in her orange VW van. Makala jumped out of the moving vehicle. LaPlante continued driving until he was eventually found hiding in a dumpster at an industrial park in Ayer, Massachusetts. He was arrested with the loaded revolver on his person. Evidence tied him conclusively to the Gustafson murders. A flannel shirt found in the woods between the 2 homes contained the Gustafsons' nameplate and a pair of wet work gloves with gunshot residue. Tracking dogs followed the scent from the shirt directly to LaPlante's home. Fiber samples from a sock used to gag Priscilla Gustafson matched fibers found on clothing LaPlante wore the day of the murders. The second stolen Ruger .22, the one not found in LaPlante's laundry basket, was confirmed as the weapon used to shoot Priscilla. In October 1988, Daniel LaPlante was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was 17 years old. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of life imprisonment. In 2017, LaPlante sought a reduced sentence under a new Massachusetts law that gave juveniles convicted of murder a meaningful opportunity to re-engage with society. He asked for the sentences to run concurrently, which would have made him eligible for parole after 30 years. At his resentencing hearing, he spoke. He apologized. He said words cannot fully capture what he had done. He said he murdered 3 innocent people. He said he robbed a 5-year-old boy of his 6th birthday and a 7-year-old girl of her 8th. He said he robbed an unborn child of his first breath. The judge was not moved. A forensic psychiatrist who evaluated LaPlante found that he was not remorseful. He continued to display antisocial personality disorder and lacked empathy. The judge affirmed the maximum sentence, 3 consecutive life terms with the possibility of parole after 45 years. LaPlante will not be eligible for a parole hearing until he is 62 years old. Priscilla Gustafson's sister, Christine Morgan, addressed the court. "It is reliving the murders all over again," she said. Another sister, Elizabeth Morgan Williams, said the family was as happy as they could be with the outcome. Daniel LaPlante remains incarcerated at the Massachusetts Correctional Institution in Norfolk. He has been in prison since 1987. He was 15 when he began living in the walls of the Bowen home. He was 17 when he murdered Priscilla Gustafson and her 2 children. The crawlspace behind the washer and dryer, the one no wider than a few inches in some places, was where it all started. A teenager who broke into houses for fun discovered that he could disappear inside the walls of a family's home and watch them from the inside. He could tap on the walls and make them think they were being haunted. He could eat their food and move their furniture and write messages in ketchup and slip back into the dark before anyone knew he was there. The Bowen family survived, but the trauma never left. Frank Bowen lived with the knowledge that his daughters had been right all along, that there was someone in the house, and he did not believe them. Tina and Karen lived with the knowledge that for months a boy with a hatchet had been watching them through holes in the walls while they slept. And all of them lived with the knowledge that it could have been them. That Daniel LaPlante, the boy in the walls, went on to murder a pregnant mother and 2 children less than 2 months after he was released. A crawlspace behind a washer and dryer, a few inches wide, peepholes into every room. That is where he lived. That is where he watched. And that is where the police finally found him, curled up in the insulation in the dark, between the walls of a house that was never haunted by a ghost. If this story makes you think about how close the Bowen family came to being LaPlante's first victims instead of the Gustafson family, you're not alone. The system released a teenager who had been living inside a family's walls with a hatchet. Less than 2 months later, 3 people were dead. Drop your thoughts in the comments. There is another case where someone was hiding in plain sight for years. But this time, the person everyone trusted turned out to be the one no one should have. That story is next.